Happy Wednesday, everyone. Welcome to our first session of Sacred Boundaries. Our focus today is finding peace and purpose in God's design. As always, I ask you to help us to spread the word to your family, friends, co-workers, or neighbors to join us on Facebook at Six Mount Zion Richmond, or YouTube at SMZBC Worships, or if you're using the browser, meetings.dialpad.com/SMZBC, or just simply by calling 804-203-9011. These lessons on boundaries, they're not just for our own peace, but they are for the health of our collective body. Before we dive into the text, first let's set the focus. Our souls long for the space to be whole. We gather today because we've been taught a lie, that peace is found in endless motion and that our worth is measured by our output. This notion of toxic productivity, the relentless drive to do more and to be busy, is a deeply ingrained Western cultural and economic force. It is especially pernicious for marginalized communities as it weaponizes historical demands for constant labor and ties our divinity to our accomplishments and our successes. But the Creator reminds us that peace is found in sacred stillness and clear lines. God called forth creation by establishing order, light from dark, water from sky, land from sea. Every act of separation was an act of love, marking the space where life could flourish. Rest, not labor, is the ultimate act of resistance against a system that seeks to define us solely by what we can produce. Today we stand on holy ground, trusting that the same divine hand, God, that drew the cosmos into order will draw the lines that bring order to our lives. Let us open up our hearts to the wisdom of limits, finding peace in the truth that we are loved, but that we are not limitless. Over the next few weeks, we'll explore what boundaries actually are, why they matter, and how they bring peace. We'll draw insight from Niger Glover Tawwab's Set Boundaries, Find Peace in Cloud and Townsend's Boundaries. Boundaries are not barriers to love. They're the structure love needs to survive. They are acts of stewardship, caring for the life the divine has entrusted in us. Boundaries tell the truth about who we are, about what we value, and what we are responsible for. Today, we begin at the beginning where God sets the very first boundary and shows that love and limits are never in conflict. Listen now, short text, Genesis 2:15, 16, and 17.
The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. And the Lord God commanded the man,
"You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will certainly die."
Before we focus on the command, let's look at the setting. This was a place of supernatural abundance. Imagine the rushing, life-giving rivers, the beauty of the gold and the onyx, the shade of every tree that was pleasing to the eye and good for food. This was a paradise of total security and well-being. God places humanity in this abundance. You're free to eat from any tree in the garden, and yet sets a single limit. From the start, divine love comes with divine structure. The garden was not confinement, but protected freedom. Crucially, the scripture notes that God gave this command to the man, quote unquote, before the second human, Eve, was created. This is significant because it highlights the first human's responsibility to know, own, and communicate God's boundary to his partner. The first failure in Eden was a failure to respect a boundary, but it was also a failure of stewardship and clear communication of the boundary. Now, let's be crystal clear on what we mean by boundaries. Dr. Cloud and Dr. Townsend in Boundaries define them as property lines that identify our ownership and control over our own feelings, our own attitudes, our own behaviors, choices, values, and limits. They write, quote, "Boundaries are a sense of personal territory They are the realization that your life belongs to you and your problems belong to you, and other people's lives and problems belong to them. The boundary is the fence that says, I am responsible to you, but not for you. Nidra Tahab in Set Boundaries Find Peace describes boundaries as proactive rules and expectations that we put in place to maintain safety and integrity in relationships. She states that boundaries are, quote, a clear way of communicating what is okay and what is not okay, unquote. Crucially, she emphasizes that boundaries protect against resentment and burned out because they ensure that we are not always operating from a place of depletion. Together, these remind us limits do not imprison us. They identify the space where peace can grow, and they lead us to ownership of our own lives. In the creation narrative, God is revealed as the ultimate boundary setter. Before the creation of humanity, God's work was fundamentally about separation and definition. Every one of these separations was an act of love and order. The divine did not simply fill a void. God defined space so that life could thrive. Boundaries are not the opposite of love. They are the framework of love. If the Creator's own relationship with creation required clear lines, then so will ours. When those lines are respected, they are shalom, peace, and wholeness. When those lines are blurred or ignored, chaos arrives. This connects perfectly with our current no complaints November mantra: no chaos, just peace. Chaos in the ancient understanding is the absence of definition and order. When we refuse to set limits in our lives, when we let others and their needs override our own God-given responsibilities, or when we overfunction and blur our personal property lines, we invite chaos back into the garden of our soul. Boundaries are your spiritual tool for resisting that chaos. Healthy boundaries provide a structure for responsibility and freedom. When we resist limits, we are often saying, quote, I want the gift of freedom without the guidance of responsibility, unquote. But every blessing has a boundary drawn around it by God for your protection. This entire process, from separating light to setting the limit in Eden, shows that God intends for all of creation, including our lives, our time, our energy, to be defined, structured, and holy. Peace requires this structure. Holiness requires this definition. If the garden showed us God setting a boundary for the sake of obedience, Mount Sinai shows God setting a boundary for the sake of reverence. There, the story shifts from the abundant freedom of Eden to the overwhelming presence of God's holiness on the mountain. Listen to God's instructions in Exodus 19, verses 10 through 13, where this text teaches. It teaches us God's limits are not arbitrary rules. They are sacred, safety protocols designed to protect life and preserve holiness.
And the Lord said to Moses,
Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow. Have them wash their clothes and be ready by the third day, because on that day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. Put limits for the people around the mountain and tell them, be careful that you do not approach the mountain or touch the foot of it. Whoever touches the mountain is to be put to death. They are to be stoned or shot with arrows. Not a hand is to be laid on them, whether people or animals. They shall not be permitted to live. Only when the ram's horn sounds a long blast may they approach the mountain.
At Sinai, God, not Moses, explicitly set the boundaries around the mountain. This boundary was not an act of exclusion designed to keep people out, but an act of protection to keep them safe from the intensity of the divine presence. Protection from treating the holy as just ordinary. Holiness sometimes requires distance, because not everything is meant to be casual or common or accessible to everyone. There are parts of your life, your inner temple, that must remain consecrated, set apart for God's purposes. This translates directly to our lives. First, your inner circle deserves a higher fence. Some areas of your life, your rest, your dreams, your time with God, your deepest emotions deserve the same reverence as Mount Sinai. Not everyone can tread on your sacred ground. Certain callings, responsibilities, moments require a fence. Not rejection, but preservation of what is holy within you. Protection from energy zappers. Nidra Tahar reminds us that boundary setting is necessary because the people in your life do not have the right to drain your energy. When we ignore our limits, we allow energy zappers, the demanding, overly critical, or constantly chaotic people to violate our peace. These are people who consume without replenishing. We've asked our church member, psychologist, and author Dr. Jessica Young Brown to share a helpful analogy that she uses with her client. And again, this is our member here, 6 Months Iron, Dr. Brown.
So whenever I'm talking to people about managing their energy or setting boundaries or general mental health, one of the things I ask people to consider is to kind of label the drains and wells in your life. Drains can be people, places, things, experiences that really just kind of deplete you and zap your energy. And wells are things that energize you, excite you, leave you feeling rejuvenated. We can't avoid drains and we can't have a life of only wells, but drains and wells are very predictable. Like, that person who calls you and when you see their number on the call ID, you're like, oh, Lord, that's a drain, right? So when we have these predictable drains in our lives, part of our responsibility around boundary setting is to do what I like to call planting wells around your drains. So when you know that something is going to zap your energy or someone is going to zap your energy, don't just let that be, right? You get to decide how you nourish yourself, how you find the places of joy in your life. And the goal is that when we're able to set up our lives in such a way that wells are all around us, we don't have to get to the point where we're feeling empty and completed. You get to take control of your life.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Setting a boundary is saying, I value the life that God placed in me too much to allow this constant drain. I am reclaiming my joy. It is a move from exhaustion to spiritual stewardship. And so today's takeaway from Mount Sinai is this: your boundaries are simply an announcement to the world that you are not a common space. You are a temple. They are the means by which you consecrate your own life, your own energy, affirming that what God has set apart must be respected. Boundaries create clarity. They define ownership. They allow relationships to breathe. Without them, love collapses into confusion, and the chaos we talked about earlier quickly seeps in. Healthy boundaries help us keep what nurtures us inside our fences and keep out what harms us. That's not selfishness, it's spiritual maintenance. A boundary is simply a clear way of communicating what is okay and what is not okay. By establishing these rules and expectations, we protect against the resentment and burnout that come when we constantly give from a place of depletion. This is what it means to be a good steward of the soul that God entrusted to us. In everyday life, honoring your boundaries might mean, number one, protecting your time, declining a meeting or commitment when your schedule is already full. Number two, guarding your energy, not answering every late night call or text, enforcing digital downtime. Number three, setting financial limits, deciding what you can or cannot afford to loan or spend and sticking to that. Number four, defining emotional space, walking away from a circular argument that has become toxic or disrespectful. And then number five, choosing your company, deciding that your peace is not up for negotiation and limiting exposure to persistent energy zappers. Every note of what drains you becomes a deeper yes to define order and your own peace. Now, let's flip over to the New Testament, to Galatians 6, verses 2 through 5. This passage is often misinterpreted, but it's foundational to understanding the theology of boundaries.
carry each other's burdens, and in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. Each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone, without comparing themselves to someone else, for each one should carry their own load.
In this text, Paul gives us a theological distinction that Dr. Cloud and Dr. Townsend base their work upon. Burden, first. This Greek word refers to a heavy, crushing weight, a crisis, a tragic event, a temporary incapacity. This is the collective responsibility of the church. We are called to help lift these impossible weights. Some could be severe illness, grief, or job loss. Number 2, load. This Greek word refers to the daily required backpack, the normal ongoing responsibilities of life, paying bills, managing one's schedule, making choices, dealing with consequences. Each person must carry their own load. Paul distinguishes burdens from loads. Burdens, as I said, the crisis, too heavy to lift alone, to the daily responsibilities. To rescue people from every consequence of their choices is to rob them of power and personal growth. Boundaries then allow compassion without control. You can love someone deeply and still say no because that is your responsibility. This is hard, but some parents need to learn this. While you love your grandchildren, continually saying yes to babysitting every weekend or financially bailing out your adult children is often carrying their load, not their burden. When we take on a load that is not ours, we prevent them from experiencing the necessary discomfort that will motivate them to develop their own discipline, their own maturity, and their own financial independence. The Boundary Book puts it this way. The problem with trying to carry someone else's load is that we prevent them from growing. God's intention is for us to grow in responsibility and character. And when we rescue someone from their load, we interrupt the Holy Spirit's work of character building in their life. Boundaries teach us how to offer support without becoming codependent. You're not mandated to be the Messiah in someone else's life. Your role is to support the person, not to circumvent their growth process. We can't do it all, and we're not called to. Many of us have been taught that exhaustion is holiness. When we try to fix everyone and manage everything, we're trying to do God's job. This is why boundaries are essential. They remind us that omnipresence is divine work, not ours. Omnipresence means God is fully present everywhere at the same time. It is an attribute of God alone. When we constantly strive to be available to everyone, everywhere, all the time, answering every call, meeting every demand, we are attempting to act outside of our created limits. Overextension becomes disobedience, disguised as kindness. True love doesn't erase the self, it respects it. Jesus modeled this truth. When crowds pressed in, he withdrew to pray. He didn't meet every demand, he stayed within his assignment. And that is what peace looks like, lived out. We honor God, not by stretching ourselves into 1,000 pieces, but by staying whole within the life that God has given us. Within the Black church tradition, we've often equated faithfulness with constant labor. Our history demanded tireless effort, making service holy, but often blurring the line between service and sacrifice. Womenist theology reminds us that caring for self is both spiritual survival and liberation. It insists that the self is worthy of God's time and protection. Rest, balance, saying no are revolutionary for a people taught to say yes, no matter the cost to the body or the spirit. Boundaries let us love from fullness, not fatigue, shifting the narratives from endless motion to intentional peace. Your boundaries are not rebellion, they are testimony. They declare, I am God's creation, not the world's convenience. Boundaries define and guard the soul. They make it possible to love freely and be loved in return, because you're not operating out of resentment or exhaustion. They are not one-time decisions, but daily practices. You won't master them any more than you master breathing. You keep doing it so life continues. Setting boundaries is about protecting your mental, emotional, and physical health. Boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're fences that protect what the Holy One is growing within. Each fence has a gate. Love opens and closes it wisely. When humanity crossed the line in Eden, peace gave way to anxiety. Each time we ignore our limits, we replay that story. Each time we honor them, we choose restoration. So this week, walk your own garden. Ask, what lines has God drawn for my peace? And which have I stepped over trying to please others? Honor your limits. Trust God's definition of your assignment and reclaim your space. Choose the restoration of walking again with God in the cool of day. As we close, I want to pause and I want you to consider a few things. First, I want you to ask yourself, where are you carrying more than God assigned? Second, ask yourself, where has guilt blurred the line between helping and rescuing? Third, I want you to ask yourself, are you experiencing repeated feelings of fear, obligation, or guilt? Also known as fog, fear, obligation, guilt about your relationships. These feelings are often boundary indicators. That's it for today. If you're heading to our after Bible study chat, which is Wednesday at our noon or 6:30 showing. So if you're watching this at any other time other than Wednesday at noon or Wednesday at 6:30, then you won't be able to participate. But if you are watching at noon or 6:30, then call 804-203-9011, 804-203-9011 to get on the line. You can go to meetings if you're using your browser, meetings.dialpad.com/SMZBC, or download the Dialpad Meetings app. All right, thank you for joining us for part 1 of our Boundaries Bible study. Let's jump over to the after